Hello, I'm Dr. Groom, and I'm looking forward to working with you today. Our lesson is based on the book Remember the Bridge, Poems of a People, written by Carol Boston Weatherford. That music we just heard was jazz. Have any of you ever listened to jazz? Let me know by using our hand signals, 1 for yes and 2 for no. Hold them up so I can see clearly. Well, it looks like we have a mix. Some have listened to jazz, but others have not, and that's okay. What's important to know is that every good jazz band has a mix of instruments that all work together to give us that magical sound so many love. Reading comprehension is like a jazz band. There are many parts that all work together to give us the magic of understanding what we read. In today's lesson, we will be focusing on 2 types of figurative language, alliteration and onomatopoeia. In previous grades, you've learned that figurative language is when a writer uses words in a different way than the literal meaning to make their work more interesting or more dramatic. Alliteration and onomatopoeia are 2 types of figurative language used in poems. They make the poem sound better to the reader. We're going to start with alliteration. This is a repetition of the beginning sound in 2 or more neighboring words or syllables. Here are 2 examples. Listen and think about the sounds. The wild whispering of winter winds weathered the woods. What sound is repeated? Yes, the W sound is repeated. Our second example is Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Think about it. What sound is repeated? Yes, the P sound is repeated. The purpose of alliteration is to create a pattern of sounds that is pleasing. It also gets the attention of the reader or listener. Next, let's explore onomatopoeia. This is a word that represents the sound that something makes. Some common examples include buzz, honk, zip, or crash. Can you think of an example? Think about it. Okay, sizzle, splat, boom, poof. You guys are pretty good at this. Now that we've talked about these 2 types of figurative language, let's see if we can find them in a poem. I'll show you first. Follow along as we read the poem Jazz Roots by Carol Boston Weatherford. It's from her book Remember the Bridge, Poems of a People. The verses are numbered and there are 4 stanzas which act like paragraphs in the poem, separating topics. Jazz Roots. Far, far from Africa, slaves kept the beat alive. The spirits of the drum gave them strength to survive. Slaves breathed their deepest longings into songs that set souls free, spirituals like prayers, plantation harmonies. In the muddy delta, the slave songs turned to blues. Singers wailed, guitars whined on asphalt avenues. When the blues went uptown with rowdy razzmatazz, the sound swelled and swaggered and swung right into jazz. The bassist plucked a rhythm, the cornet blared its call, jitterbugs were jumping beneath a mirrored ball. The piano plinked and tinkled, the singer tapped her feet, she rapped her songs in satin while the drum kept the beat. Let's take a closer look at verse 15 and 16. Remember, alliteration is a repetition of the beginning sound in 2 or more neighboring words. The author wrote, the sounds swelled and swaggered and swung right into jazz. Can you find alliteration? Think about it. Great job! The sounds swelled and swaggered and swung. We can hear and see the author emphasize the S sound in her description of jazz. Remember, alliteration is not a repetition of letters, it's a repetition of sound. Let's look at all of the 3rd stanza of our poem. Can you spot another example of alliteration? Think about it. Give me a high 5 when you're ready to move on. yes. Slave and song both start with the S sound. Okay, the R sound is repeated in rowdy razzmatazz. Oh, okay. We have another example of alliteration. Asphalt avenues. The A is repeated. All right, very good. If there was a line that read, the tambourine made happy sounds, would the and tambourine be an example of alliteration? Think about it. Use your hand signals, 1 for yes and 2 for no. You guys are pretty smart. I can't trick you. Alliteration is a repetition of sound. Even though both words start with the letter T, the sound the T makes in the is not the same sound the T makes in tambourine. Let's take a look at another type of figurative language that also uses sound to make the text more interesting. Onomatopoeia. We'll look at a poem I wrote. The title is Jazzy Sounds. Jazzy Sounds, written by Alita Groom. I love the whiz and sizzle of jazz. It makes my soul roll, swish and sway. The ooze of live jazz is a hoot. The crowd is proud of the beats. When I hear the beep and howl of the band, I hear a hippity-hoppity hustle of harmony. First, it's music, then poof, dance, zap, song. Then the jingle, jangle, joyous jams. Notes zoom and vroom so sweet, they swish and sway the night away. Do you remember what an onomatopoeia is? Think about it. Use your hand signals, 1 for yes and 2 for no. I see lots of ones. Onomatopoeia is a word that represents the sound that something makes. I see many examples of onomatopoeia in this poem. Do you see any examples of onomatopoeia in the first stanza? Shout it out to me. I thought I heard you say whiz and sizzle. That's right. Now, I need your help to determine where there is alliteration and where there is onomatopoeia. You'll need paper and a writing tool. Number your paper from 1 to 6. I'm going to read verses from the poem. If the words are examples of alliteration because they start with the same sound, write an A. If the words are an example of onomatopoeia because they represent a sound, write an O. Let's practice before we write our answers. The band's jazz jumps and jams. In this text, the J sound is repeated in jazz, jumps, and jam. These words create an image in the reader's head by repeating the sound. This is alliteration. Let's practice one more time before we write. The author wrote, the ooze of live jazz is a hoot. Ooze and hoot are examples of onomatopoeia because they represent the sound that something makes. Let's get started. Number 1. When I hear the beep and howl of the band, are these words examples of alliteration or onomatopoeia? Read the text again. Think about it. Beep and howl are examples of onomatopoeia. You should have written an O for number 1. Number 2. I hear a hippity-hoppity hustle of harmony. Are these words examples of alliteration or onomatopoeia? Read the text again and think about it. This is an example of alliteration, and you should have written an A for number 2. Let's move on to number 3. First it's music, then poof, dance, zap, song. Are these words examples of alliteration or onomatopoeia? Read the text again. Think about it. Poof and zap are examples of onomatopoeia. You should have written an O for number 3. Number 4, the jingle jangle joyous jams. Are these words examples of alliteration or onomatopoeia? Read the text again. Think about it. Is this an example of alliteration This is an example of alliteration, and you should have written an A for number 4. On to number 5. Notes, zoom, and vroom so sweet. Are these words examples of alliteration or onomatopoeia? Read the text again and think about it. Okay, zoom and vroom are examples of onomatopoeia. You should have written an O for number 5. Our last one is number 6. They swish and sway the night away. Are these words examples of alliteration or onomatopoeia? Read the text again and think about it. I'm interested to know what you selected for this verse, onomatopoeia or alliteration. Guess what? This is an example of both. Switch and sway start with the sw sound. They are also words that represent a sound. Did you choose both? I bet you did. You guys did a great job. Today we looked at 2 types of figurative language, alliteration and onomatopoeia. We learned that writers use figurative language to make their text interesting. Alliteration and onomatopoeia use sound to grab the reader's attention. I challenge you to listen to your favorite song and see if you can find one example of alliteration and one example of onomatopoeia in the lyrics of the song. Write the examples down and tell a friend or trusted adult. Thanks for learning with me today. See you next time.